Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Knowledge Group webcast, Cloud-to-Cloud Data Protection, Managing and Protecting Your Business Data, the live webcast. I'm David Jennings. I'll be your moderator for today's event. We're going to get right to our panel, but I would like to point out on the next few pages you'll find useful information regarding some of the mechanics of today's webinar, as well as information on the participants and their companies. Please feel free to review these pages for answers to some of the most commonly asked questions. During today's webinar, you'll receive an email survey. If you're applying for continuing education credit, responding to that survey is mandatory. We'll give out 4 secret words at randomly selected times over the next 90 minutes. You'll need to enter those words in the survey as proof you attended. If you have any questions about that, please contact us by email, info@theknowledgegroup.org. Want to take a moment to thank our participating sponsor for today's webinar, Veeam Software, and partner firms Frost Sullivan and C2 Labs. Please feel free to visit their respective websites for additional information on the services they provide. Today's panel, Andrey Zhelezko. He's a Veeam Technical Product Analyst. He currently works at Veeam Software's Product Strategy Team. He's a certified IT professional with more than a decade of industry experience. Initially doing tech support for various solutions, he has got practical expertise, which has helped him to speak the same language as Veeam community members. You can always find him presenting at different offline and online events where he loves to solve the challenges associated with data protection. His motto is to help others realize the beauty and power of modern visualization and cloud technologies. Lynda Stadtmueller is Vice President of Cloud Computing Services at Frost Sullivan. Research areas include digital transformation, cloud and data center services, public-private, hybrid cloud, colo managed services, storage and infrastructure. She's a frequent speaker and contributor to technology publications. Ms. Stadtmueller has more than 20 years' experience in the communications industry. Before joining Frost & Sullivan, she worked for a number of companies, including AT&T and a number of its ventures. She also has experience as a telecom expense management provider at Telwares. Anil Karmel is CEO of C2 Labs. They partner with organizations on their digital transformation journey, from designing and implementing IT strategic plans to allow IT to move at the speed of business, to a deep specialization in application rationalization and transformation, allowing customers to take back control. Before this, Anil was the Deputy Chief Technical Officer for the U.S. Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. Karmel and his team have garnered industry and government accolades, including the SANS National Cybersecurity Innovation Award for Cloud Security. He also serves as the co-chair of the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cloud Security Working Group, and he's president of the Cloud Security Alliance's D.C. Metro Area Chapter. Want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists who've been exceptionally generous with their help and support in preparing for today's event. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, let's go to slide 12 and turn things over to our first presenter, Ms. Lynda Stadtmueller. Lynda.
Thank you, David, and thank you to all the participants who have joined us today. Let's go to the next slide. I'd like to start by talking about something that should be very familiar to most of you on this call, digital transformation. You may not use that term. You may simply call it adopting new technologies. You may call it strategic planning for the future. But my guess is that most people on this call and their colleagues, both on the business side and the IT side, are looking for ways actively to leverage technology to maintain differentiation and get ahead in a hyper-competitive market. And that means looking at your business goals that have become increasingly urgent, goals such as business agility. You need to be able to move on a dime and pivot in order to respond to what's going on in the market. Speed to market, you got to get out of there before your competitors do. Security and compliance. My colleague Anil is going to be talking in greater detail about that later, but it's top of mind for every business. You need to grow, expand, find new revenue streams in order to forestall disruptions. And innovation, this is something we're hearing more and more. Businesses in every industry understand that they need to continually bring something new to the market in order to stand out, in order to attract increasingly discriminating customers. And the way they're doing it is they're looking at technology to support new ways of operating, new models, new processes, and they're using things like Internet of Things, mobile everywhere, mobile access, collaboration, partnerships. It's no longer a do-it-yourself world for IT. And the concept of IT shifting its role to that of a service broker. Instead of deciding what technologies will be adopted into the company, IT is working with increasingly influential line of business colleagues to understand what the business needs, what the urgency is, and then provide services and assurances to their internal customers. Now we're seeing that cloud is increasingly a foundation for digital transformation initiatives. According to a survey that my company runs, we run it every year among IT decision makers. This year, 51% of decision makers, IT decision makers, told us that the cloud is the most critical part of their digital transformation strategies. And 62% say their cloud strategy is essential to remaining competitive in their industry. Let's go to the next slide. What we're seeing also is that of all the changes that are going on right now, the most impactful may be the way we are using data. Businesses are recognizing their corporate data as a strategic asset. And I'll point to those two statistics there on the right. My company did a survey, it was in late 2016, just about 2 years ago. Worldwide, CEOs across a range of industries and business sizes, 53%, the top growth driver, when we said, what are you pinning your company's future on? What is your top driver of growth? 53% of those CEIs said it's data analytics. It's the insights that we can get by analyzing the data we have. Now, at the same time, when we ask, what is your greatest threat? They say 45% say it's their competitors' use of analytics. We're getting a very clear message. Either you learn how to use analytics and leverage the value you can get from analyzing your data and using advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. Either you learn how to do that for competitive advantage, or you risk having your competitors do it and leaving you in the dust. But data is different. The way we collect it, the way we manage it, the way we handle it, and its strategic importance is different than it was certainly back in my day, but even different than it was a few years ago. You know, first, there's more of it. The volumes themselves are just tremendous. And again, until a few years ago, volume was the biggest issue when we looked at how to store the data, how to manage it. But today it's more than volume. It's that we have more types of data, more sources, the data we get in is changing more frequently. We're looking at not just structured data with those neat little columns and rows, but more unstructured data, things like maps and images and streaming media and semi-structured data. We're finding value even in things like emails or Word documents. And the data that we're getting isn't all data we've generated within our own companies. Much of it can be public. We've got proprietary data, we've licensed data, we collect data, and we bring it all together. But the other thing is we're not just amassing data, we're making the data work a lot harder for us. We do traditional data mining, but we're using large volumes of data for predictive analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence embedded into applications. So as a result of all that, data integrity is top of mind. Data accessibility and data protection are critical. So let's go on to the next slide. As we noted, the cloud is a foundation for digital transformation, but it's kind of an interesting thing. One of the shifts I've seen in businesses' perceptions of the cloud has been from wholly a tactical effort to something more strategic. Back in 2010, when I first started doing this survey, pretty much all the answers, when I said, what's driving you to the cloud? What are you looking for in the cloud? Almost all the answers came from that right side of this slide, the tactical drivers. And those are still critically important. These are the results we're seeing in the 2018 survey. 70% say, I want to reduce the maintenance burden for hardware and software. I want to manage that data growth we just talked about, improve my ability to do business continuity, reduce costs, make it more budget friendly by having a lot of IT costs part of the operating budget. But here's what we're seeing over the last few years. More and more IT leaders are no longer looking at cloud as a way to help their own department, but as a way to help their business. There's more responsibility and more accountability for having the business achieve strategic goals. So now our drivers take things like position my company to take advantage of new technologies. You need to be in the cloud or at least have cloud-enabled software and APIs if you're going to use the latest, the next generation of technologies. They want to deliver services faster. They want to free up their staff to focus on innovation. See, there's that innovation again. And support business agility. But if we go to the next slide, we're seeing that the public cloud isn't the answer to everything. Businesses have been very clear from the start that they expect to use multiple deployment options. They want to be able to manage all their different deployment options, cloud and premises, hosted, remote, local. They want to be able to manage them all in a hybrid arrangement. In fact, what we see is that on average, businesses use 5.4 deployment options, and that can be anything from, single or multi-tenant cloud to co-location. Yep, 70% of businesses not only still use co-location, but we're seeing a slight uptick in use of co-location for critical business apps. They want to use certain software as a service, maybe Office 365, critical applications in that model. And they're going to use multiple clouds. So businesses on average use, 80% of businesses use more than one cloud, and some 36% are using more than three different cloud providers. So we're not seeing businesses saying, gee, I'm putting it all into AWS. AWS could take all of their cloud workloads. So could Google Cloud Platform or Azure or any number of other providers. But interestingly enough, businesses are saying, no, I want to use multiple cloud services. Let's go to the next slide. And the reason businesses want to use multiple clouds is that they see opportunities, they see what they want to achieve, and they feel that the best way is to leverage multiple different providers. In some cases, they simply want to avoid vendor lock-in with a specific cloud. They want to make sure to place each workload in the optimal cloud. All clouds are not alike. It's not a commodity, and every provider has its own strengths. Other businesses are looking to integrate different workloads. Again, very few workloads today are kind of monolithic, standalone applications. Applications are reaching into microservices. There's even serverless applications. There's APIs. And in that situation, your workload may actually encompass data, applications, microservices that are deployed on multiple different clouds. They've got a location sensitivity is one driver. In an era where data sovereignty is important, not every cloud service provider has a data center in every geography where you do business. Or some applications may be latency sensitive, which may also impact where you choose to deploy your applications. And then backup and recovery, some businesses decide that they want to back up one cloud with another cloud, or back up one location, one region with another region. So there's many reasons why businesses are choosing to use multiple clouds. But here's one thing that they want from their multi-cloud environments. They want simplicity of management. And it's not always easy to get. If you look at that chart there, 75% of respondents, when we say, what's important to you in this multi-cloud environment? 75% say, simply enough, I want a platform that supports all my different clouds. I want one that supports all my different environments. They don't want, each time they add a cloud service, they don't want to have to learn a new management system. And they also want commonality across metrics that they achieve. Ease of migration, very difficult to do on your own very often. They're looking for automated failover among clouds. So their needs, their desires in terms of managing a multi-cloud environment point out how difficult it is on its own and how important it is that they tame that complexity and be able to manage a pool of resources that may be deployed in multiple different clouds or even on premises. But if we go to the next slide, having it all isn't easy. I want to point out, these are some interesting statistics that we find. As I mentioned, I've been surveying IT decision makers since about 2010, and we're seeing a shift in what their expectations were back then versus today. And I'll go through a couple of these. In 2010, if you recall, we all thought cloud was the easiest thing in the world. Make a couple of mouse clicks. You don't even have to get a purchase order. Just put something up in the cloud. It's the easiest thing in the world. And lock-in was less of a concern. Almost 30% had a concern, but the rest didn't because they figured, if I don't like it, I can pull it back out. Today, 50% have a concern about lock-in. Moving, migrating across clouds, among clouds, or even back to the premises data center is not as easy as it was hoped. Then look at migration. Boy, in 2010, when we all thought it was a couple of mouse clicks, only 5% thought that was an issue. Now 50%, now that they've tried it, 50% are saying, wow, this is a problem. Managing multiple clouds. In 2012 was the first time we asked that question. 12% thought that would be a challenge versus the 51% who have tried it and are having problems. Backup and recovery, that was an issue for 32%. There was some concern there. And today, 47%. But this last one is one I find very interesting. Application uptime. 2010, only 15% thought that was an issue. Today, 70%. And that's partially, I'd imagine, a function of experience with clouds. It's probably more so a function of the changes in expectations regarding application uptime. We're no longer in a position where a business can say, we're shutting down over the weekend to deploy an upgrade, or we're going to shut down overnight to back up our data. That's permissible in fewer and fewer and fewer applications. If your customers, if your partners, if your employees run into an application that is down, it's hurting productivity, it's hurting revenues, and it's hurting customer satisfaction. So let's go on to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the expectations, the concerns, the challenges related to multi-cloud deployments among people who have already started their implementations of a multiple cloud. And the most important takeaway here is that businesses are primarily concerned about security. Surprise? Not really. They've been concerned about cloud security since the start. And we're fortunate today because my colleague Anil Karmel is going to be talking about security in the cloud. But I just wanted to point out here that it is a critical and concern, an ongoing concern for businesses. You know, when in my survey this year, one of the things we talked about was the cloud security shared responsibility model, wherein responsibility for keeping your data safe, keeping it protected for a cloud workload is actually split between the provider and the enterprise. With the enterprise carrying a very heavy burden, especially related to any kind of data breaches or data loss. And in our survey, it turns out that less than a quarter of businesses say they consistently and comprehensively implement their portion of the cloud security shared responsibility model for cloud workloads, and 36% say they're really not even familiar with the model. So these are people who've deployed their applications into the cloud, and they don't fully understand what it takes to keep the applications safe, to keep them running, to protect their data, data integrity and availability. So let's move to the next slide, and we can talk about what you can do, what businesses can do to simplify and improve data protection with a cross-cloud data protection platform. And again, my colleague Andrew is going to talk about Veeam's solution here, but let me just give you a little overview of a data protection platform. This is a type of a platform a single platform that will facilitate and automate data protection functions, including data replication, application availability, archival storage, data sovereignty, compliance, backup and recovery. But the critical point is it needs to do all those things across all the different clouds that you leverage. So on the next slide, how can the cross-cloud data protection platform help you? Well, I'm going to split this again into the tactical IT benefits. How does it make the IT leader, the IT organization's life easier versus the strategic business benefits? From an IT perspective, wow, it optimizes cloud apps. You make sure that you've got your cloud virtual machines, cloud instances deployed in the right cloud, in the right, the right size instance, and because you can manage across different clouds, you have a better opportunity to see whether applications are optimized and to move them when they're not. It protects your data, increases that app availability, all important, minimizes migration challenges. Again, that's a big sticking point. Assures compliance, data sovereignty, because you can make sure that your data is in the right geography, in the right cloud region. Reduces the management burden. Boy, instead of learning, 2, 3, 5 different management systems, you've got it all. And that helps manage the costs. But when you're talking to, in fact, when businesses, I often help businesses create a business case where they explain to their senior leadership why they want another platform. We talk about the strategic business benefits, and quite simply, it protects your business. More and more businesses today are digital businesses. Back in the day, there were certain businesses that were in the technology industry. Today, nearly every business is in the technology business. As more and more customer interactions are digitized, it's so important to keep those applications available. Increase customer satisfaction, that's the only way you can do that, is if you're there by having your applications available. next generation technology so that you can leverage that, increased business agility because it's a pool of resources. It's the closest thing you're going to get to normalizing across different clouds, different infrastructure options with a single pool of resources that you can make work for you optimally. So let's look at the next slide. We'll talk about what you should look for because they're not all the same. So when you're looking at a cross-cloud data protection solution, you've got to make sure it supports all the major clouds, not just the ones you're using today. This stuff is changing so quickly that you need to be able to have a platform that will support services that you don't even use today because you may or probably will in the future. And here's another, here's a sticking point with a lot of solutions. You want it to support your on-premises data center. You've got data split across multiple different deployment options and data centers, and the odds are your on-premises data center probably still includes a lot of pretty important data. Make sure that that's part of the solution. Supports all your data and applications, no matter how they're coded, no matter what their source is, no matter what the format is. You want it deployable in your data center, not only hosted on a specific cloud. And you want a simple, intuitive user interface. My colleague Andrew is going to be demonstrating Veeam's solution, and I think you'll see what an intuitive user interface looks like versus something that you need to actually train people significantly, spend a lot of time doing training and backup training to make it workable in your business. And you want a provider with an extensive ecosystem because no cloud stands alone, no business IT plan stands alone. So let's go to my final slide. And we'll do a little summary here. If you have a hybrid cloud strategy, which you should, then you need a cross-cloud data protection solution. And what you get from that is it will deliver for all your data and your applications the availability, the performance, the compliance, and the cost efficiencies you need to help you successfully compete. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to David.
All right, thank you very much, Lynda Stadtmueller. Let's get our first secret word in. That word is strategic, S-T-R-A-T-E-G-I-C. That is strategic. Now let's go to slide 24 and our second presenter. He is a technical product analyst at Veeam Software. Here's Andrew Zhelezko. Andrew.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Lynda. That was really interesting piece of the conversation that we're having today. And well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that you managed to join us today, and I hope you're having a good time. And before I start talking about Veeam and Veeam products itself, I would like to kind of briefly describe the agenda of what I'm going to talk about for the next half an hour or so. So I get the little introduction into the Veeam and our multi-cloud story, and it is about our data management and data management solutions that we have. But besides of that, since I'm a technical kind of guy, I would love to demonstrate a couple of solutions that we have. And all of those solutions belong to the same Veeam availability platform that Lynda was mentioning already. And my point is that I would like you to join me in this journey, and I would like you to see how intuitive the user interface and user experience could be with Veeam products. Okay, with that, a couple of words about Veeam itself. So we've been around for more than 10 years. And obviously, we started as a company, well, there was kind of no cloud back then, or there was just small clouds and not really a thing. So we started as a data protection solution, and we became fairly known because of our flagship Veeam backup and replication product, which was addressing the challenges for data protection of virtual machines in the sort of a traditional data center within VMware. And then with how the technology evolved and we grew, as well. So once people started to adopt cloud, and first of all, that was the kind of the availability in the private cloud, and then now it's multi-cloud. So we've been growing with all of you, and I guess this is the most interesting part, is that we really look forward to work with you and to walk and to touch you by the hand, and so that you can manage your data and you can always protect it so the data is available. Okay, the next slide, please. Yeah, this is our current story about multi-cloud needs, and it's really important to understand that we've had a strong partnership with a lot of public and big guys and kind of smaller guys. We've got the huge ecosystem of our service and cloud providers. We've got like a lot of companies from top 500, and we've got those references from all over the world. But I guess this is not the most important thing. The most important, like I was trying to tell you already, so we are really obsessed with data management, and we always try to find the best solution for you and the best way to manage the data. And as a company which started from the working with a certain exploit of ASXi back then, so we will always curious about the ways how you can do much more with all that you have at the moment. Okay, next slide, please. This is our current initiative. This is our current the research about current needs of you guys, of the customers and partners that we've got. And it's all about the multi-cloud. But the thing is that it's not about multi-cloud. It's about hybrid cloud, like Lynda was saying already within her research. So you guys and the customers, you're all looking for the ways to bring the data from the cloud to on-premises and from on-premises to the cloud, to protect it within this hybrid environment, to move it back and forward. And so the migration of the data should be sort of transparent. And this is the way how we would like our solutions to work. So we've been trying to to address all those possible migration scenarios or data flows by dividing all the things together into the 6 different categories. So you can see those, the cloud backup and disaster recovery within the cloud, or this could be a cross-cloud backup or cross-cloud replication. I'm not saying that we've got the perfect just one solution for everything. No, it's not like that. But we've got the Veeam availability platform, which kind of serves as an umbrella and kind of includes everything that we've got, all of our solutions, and that make them all together working. And so if you got them, you should make sure that you've got your hybrid data center, which is a really modern one. You've got it covered. Okay, the next slide. All those categories that I've been talking about, we've got the certain solution for one of those, right? And the point of my talk today is I wanted to find a couple of categories, and I wanted to show how exactly our software works, so it would be easy for you to understand, how easy it could be to work with our solutions, and how easy it could be to migrate the data and to ensure data availability within your hybrid data center. The next one. The first technology I wanted to talk about is Veeam Cloud Connect, and if you just switch to the next slide, we should be able to see the numbers of our cloud solution and cloud portfolio. So our cloud model is that we've developed our certain Cloud Connect solution, and I will show the technical diagrams a bit later. But it's been with us for 5 years, I guess, and we've got, by this particular point of time, we've got 16,000 cloud providers all over the world. It could be global guys, it could be not so global, local companies, not that famous, could be regional ones. So we've got all of those partners, and we well, we do not offer any cloud ourselves, but it just, for us, we developed a solution that bridges the gap between the end users, between our customers and the service providers. And so they have to install the things at both ends, but then they work together perfectly. And then it's really secure. Well, I'll show it later. It's data encrypted, and it's perfectly suitable for the compliance and everything. And for you guys, if you're looking for a way to extend the data center to the cloud, or to have the cloud as a point to provide you, well, in case of data, in case of disaster recovery. So you could fail over, you could switch to the cloud provider side. The next slide. Like I said before, our solution for that Cloud Connect backup is consisting of basically the same product. It's Veeam backup and application installed on the tenant side and at the same time on the service provider side with just different license. And they both communicate with each other via the certain cloud gateways. And it's really easy to deploy it. It's really easy to enable the certain additional features if it needs, such as one accelerator. And it's really easy not to just provide a cloud backup like it's here, because it's here, the tenant creates the backups at his side, and then whenever he needs, sends them all together to the service provider side. But besides of that, next slide. It could be also extended to Veeam Cloud Connect replication, where the service provider side, it could be a temporary data center for the local tenant. So whenever something happens with the local tenant, so he performs the disaster recovery and utilizing the resources, the services that service provider is capable of. And so the process is really easy. And this is something I wanted to show you from both perspectives, from the tenant side and from the service provider side. The next slide. I'm going to show the demo that I've been doing. It is something how you can set it up all together, the cloud replication, and how you can fail over whenever disaster actually happens. So if we just run it, you can see that I'm using Veeam Backup and Application 9.5, which is our major product. And now I'm switching to the service provider side. So here is the same interface, it's just from the service provider. Here it is the special menu, it's named Cloud Connect. Now I'm adding the hardware plan, which means that I'm selecting the host, which I'm going to offer to my tenant. I'm selecting the CPU, RAM, storage, and network that, well, I'm going to temporarily share with them whenever they need. And so for me, it's just to set some quotas, because it could be multiple tenants. They're all protected all together, but it's just I would like them to be kind of isolated from each other, and I would like them to be able to use as a service provider, the site whenever they need it. Okay. So I created already the hardware plan, which I'm going to share with my tenant. And now I'm going to the tenant, which is ABC company, and I'm just clicking through its settings. I already pre-created the tenant. Well, I created a username and the password for the tenant. And then now I'm enabling that hardware plan. So the tenant at his site should be able to refresh the connection and get this information about my newest hardware plan, which is basically the amount of resources I'm going to share. Okay, so I switched to the tenant side, and now I'm refreshing the information from the service provider. Okay, once that's done, I'm creating a replication job, and, well, obviously I name it after my Exchange server, which is very important to me. So I'm adding my virtual machine, my virtual Exchange server. And this is the most important part. Whenever on a destination side, I selected the cloud host, and I had to select the service provider side because, well, the service provider already provided that information for me. And so this is the replication process. Well, I had to speed it up a bit, but since we're limited in time. But then in just several minutes, I was able to replicate my exchange to the service provider side. And now I can go to replicas and I can see that ABC Exchange server is in the cloud and it's ready, the ready state. Now I'm going to ping it to see that it's available. Okay, so working fine, everything's good. But then something can happen, and it could be malfunction, it could be the software issue, it could be something else, or hardware issue. Well, in my case, it's someone, the typical insider, went to the vSphere console and just turned it off. Obviously, this is not the ideal scenario I was looking for. So I'm going again back to my Veeam console, and on this ABC Exchange server, I'm just right-clicking on it, and I'm selecting the option to fail over to the replica of this Exchange server. And now what happens is, I'm still trying to get access to my Exchange server, but now what happens is at the service provider side, my replica of my Exchange server is being booted up, and a couple of settings are going to be applied to it. So I'll get the same network access to my replica of my Exchange server. And now in just a couple of seconds, you can see, well, I had to speed it up, but then within a minute, I get my Exchange server up and running on the service provider side. Okay, so you can see, well, it's available. To prove that point, I can even RDP to my Exchange and to see that, you know, it is the same Exchange that I need. And I'm using the same IP address. I'm using the same, well, connection settings. So it's just what happens is my local data center was extended to the service provider side. And now I can do anything with my Exchange to fix it. But then I can undo failover. I can fail back to production because, well, if I fix my Exchange server on-prem and then I need it to ingest the temporary changes that happened with it, so I can perform the separation, fail back to production. So all the temporary changes within Exchange being running on the service provider side would be applied to my initial Exchange. And so the transition would be almost perfect. Okay, that was the one thing I wanted to do. Let's get back to our slides. Okay, the next, please. Yeah. The next solution, what we've got, is Veeam Backup for Office 365. It is really important to understand, if you just click on the next, it's really important to understand that a lot of things can happen with your data, and it doesn't matter. Okay, this particular part is in the cloud. This is the popular misconception that, okay, if I have my Exchange online service running somewhere in the cloud, so it's about the Microsoft. They should take care of my data. No, it's not like that. If you check the Microsoft data responsibility model or AWS or any other cloud companies, so it would be the common sense that, well, they build the infrastructure, they take care of it. But then when it comes to user data, well, they don't care that much because, well, it's up to the user to decide what he or she is going to do with the data. And so it can happen that it would be accidental deletion. It could be some weird retention policy, or it could be the outages, but something could happen with the data. And so Microsoft clearly says that it's your call now. You have to take care of it. Next slide, please. So we've got a solution for all those possible scenarios. And well, our solution is obviously to take care of it and to provide you with a solution to back up the data. And now it is Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365, which is already version 2.0. And we've got the solution that combines Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for business protection. So you can set it up. It's a really tiny application. You can set it up even somewhere in the cloud, but just to ensure the certain redundancy. But then you can set it up on-prem, and so the data will be coming on-prem, and then whenever you need, you will be able to recover the data using our Veeam Explorers, which is really easy and intuitive way to recover any data. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's time to show this one, how Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365 works. So I'm using the previous version, but well, the idea is still the same. I installed it somewhere on-prem within my virtual machine, somewhere in my data center. But since the application it's all about 10 megabytes, so it's really easy. It doesn't require a lot of resources, and you can scale it up because it comes with a certain idea to provide you with backup proxies and backup repositories, so you can scale it up at any scale, basically. Okay, let's run it. Let's see how it works. So I'm going to protect my Exchange Online server right now. And so what should happen is that I need to add my organization, which is something that's where my data is. I'm selecting the Microsoft Office 365 deployments, and I'm selecting the default region, and then I'm providing it with my username and the password for my email service, right? What happens now is that it connects to my Office 365, and then it populates all information from my organization. Now I can go to the backup. It's just a simple button backup, and now I have to come up with the name for the backup job, for the description, so it would be easy for me to understand what happens. And then I click next, and I select to backup all mailbox that I have access for. And if I need to exclude anything, and if I need to scale it up to provide the other backup repositories or backup proxies. And I just select to run the job when I click create. Okay, so now this is the process of backup being done, basically. Veeam is going to connect to my Microsoft Office 365 deployment, and then it's going to process all the data that I have there and bring it on-prem and store it in the certain database. Okay, now we've got it. So I'm going back to my email, and well, that was the really important email, what I needed it. But then, well, something happens, and now I'm manually deleting this email and deleting it from deleted items, and then I'm even purging it from the recycle bin. So I do not have this email anymore, or that could be just my email got older, and well, but I need to recover it. So what happens is I go back to my Veeam solution, and I'm clicking on recover the data. And now I'm just, okay, here is the Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Exchange. This is a really cool utility. So you can just go, you can scroll somewhere, and you can just select the data that you need to recover. And then you can always find your email. You can see all of those operations available for you within, export, recover it to the original location or recover to some other location. And I'm just providing my credentials again to my email account, selecting to recover it to my email account. And I'm coming back, and my email is already here. So it was like just a couple of clicks, and then my data is available, my data is with me. I guess this is really a cool thing to do. It's just, again, if Microsoft cannot and do not have to guarantee the availability of my data, I have to take care of that. And well, this could be a solution for me to protect my my data, which comes from the SaaS infrastructure. Okay. And let's come back to the presentation. Okay, that was the second part. And the third part, and to be honest, this is probably going to be the coolest one, at least for me. This is the solution I'm going to talk about, because this is the something new for us, for Veeam. So we acquired the company N2WS, and they are really famous for their product, which is Cloud Protection Manager, the certain way to protect the AWS workloads. That if you have AWS account, if you run their EC2 instances, some probably databases. So Cloud Protection Manager might be something that you're already familiar with. But the story is that we acquired the company, and now we're working, we can certainly leverage them for our multi-cloud story, and we can already do some cool things like I'm going to show in a couple of seconds. But then we're working on integrate the solution into our Veeam availability platform, and with each newer iteration, it will be much more integration will be happening. Okay, but what's already available even today? Okay, let's switch the slide, and you can see why would you need to protect your AWS data. It could be the same reasons as with Microsoft Office 365, but it could be something different. Anyway, it's all about possibility or probability of some potential disaster happen with your AWS environment. And so it's better to be ready for it whenever it is the ABS failure or human error or failure of availability zone, or it could be a compliance reason because with recent laws, especially in Europe with GDPR and with some other laws around the world, it could be the issue for you. So you have to be compliant, and it's all the time it's about auditing. So when they come, well, you need to prove that everything is going according to the law. Okay, a lot of reasons. So what could be the solution for it? Next slide, please. And the solution for it could be the Cloud Protection Manager from AWS, like I was telling you before. So with this solution, which I'm going to demonstrate in a couple of just seconds, you should be able to protect AWS workloads, and it should be really easy for you to automate your backup or sort of data management lifecycle environment. And the most important, as always, is the recovery options. Whenever you need to recover a single file from the EC2 instance or the full environment, you can do it in less than 60 seconds, within the minute. It's really easy, and it's really fast because it's working in the cloud, and it's leveraging a lot of cool things that AWS already prepared. So once I show you how it works, you will understand what I'm talking about. The next slide, please. Yeah, basically what Cloud Protection Manager is it's another EC2 instance. It's a tiny Linux appliance which is working somewhere in your AWS account. The configuration is really easy. You just go to the marketplace and you search for the Cloud Protection Manager, and then you deploy it within a couple of minutes. And then, well, obviously there are different licensing issues that you need to solve. You need to buy a license, or you bring your own one. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you give that Cloud Protection Manager access to your AWS account, and then the magic happens. Then the server would be managing all those EC2 instance snapshot creation and the data recovery. And in just a few seconds, I'm going to show you how it would be done. The next slide, please. Yeah, for the third demo, I was thinking about merging kind of the on-premises with the clouds. And I wanted to show how you can do the cloud migration. So yeah, if we just run the demo, I'll tell you how it works. I'm using Veeam Backup and Application 9.5. And the thing is that I'm trying to connect to my Linux physical server, which is somewhere in my data center. Okay, that was fast enough, but anyway, I proved I ran the top command, so you could have seen that, well, I run that Linux server. So what I'm doing now is I'm trying to create for my physical Linux server, I'm trying to create the agent backup job within the Veeam Backup and Application. And I needed to provide the IP address of my physical server and some credentials for it, obviously. So what happens now is I ran the job, and now Veeam is rescanning the physical Linux server, and it found out that there is no Veeam inside of it, obviously. So the first thing to do is to deploy the package and to install it inside of my physical server. Now, once that's done, Veeam goes and just backs it up on my physical server. So in a couple of minutes, the data will be in my Veeam backup repository. Okay, just a few more seconds. There you go. Okay, so the data is in my Veeam backup repository, and now I can definitely right-click on my backup, and I can select any option for recovery. But something that would be interesting for me to recover my physical server to cloud, to basically to the Amazon now. I'm going to provide Veeam with my credentials for AWS, obviously. Then I'm going to specify the region I'm going to recover to. Now I have to select the instance type. I have to select the instance name, the network configuration, and to select all those. So it would be easy for Veeam to upload the data, that backup that I have at the moment in my data center, to upload it to the cloud and to recover it there. So I'm specifying all those settings now, and within this, it's almost the last step. I'm just ready to recover the data, my physical Linux server to the cloud. And there it goes. So the process is, well, it might be not that fast, but still we need to talk to AWS and we need to perform some sort of conversion, because it's the EC2 instance. This is the really special instance, and it really depends on the operation system that you use, on the file system, and whether the physical server had any BIOS model. But so we import the data and we perform the conversion, and now I can go to my AWS console, and I can see my physical instance being recovered, and now it is already a cloud instance. And now I'm going to log into that cloud instance, and I can see that it should be working. Okay, I'm providing my username, the password, and just running the top commands. So you can see, it's working fine, and it's working now in AWS. Okay, but then now I need to protect it. So what would I do? I'm going to the AWS marketplace, and I'm looking for the solution for it. Like I told you before, N2WS Cloud Protection Manager, it's already here, and if I need it, well, I can certainly just deploy it within a couple of clicks. Okay, since I deployed it previously, just not to waste our time, I'm going to connect to it and to show you the interface, how it looks like. Okay, so the interface is kind of simple. You just log into the web console, you then go to accounts, you add your AWS account, and then you're able to basically to do anything. So the first thing that you would like to do is to create a backup policy, and then, well, you provide a special name for it, you provide your account already provided, and now you have to select the backup targets, which is the way for us to tell the Cloud Protection Manager what kind of target I would like to protect, what kind of EC2 instance, if it's EC2 instance. So I'm going to this Ohio region, I'm selecting my that server that was recently recovered to AWS, and now I'm going to enable the DR options for it. So I'm enabling to perform disaster recovery, or this like the template for disaster recovery every single time I'm running the backup, and I'm selecting additional region. It would be, so my recovered instance is in Ohio, and I have selected the Northern California to be the certain disaster recovery for my instance. Okay, then I ran the policy manually, and now I'm just refreshing it. It's really fast, so I had to refresh just in a few seconds, and I can see that backup was successful. Disaster recovery status is completed, which means that, okay, disaster recovery copy is ready and it's waiting for me. Whenever something happens, I can recover. And so I click on recover, which is already there, And now I select the recovery to different region, which would be in the Northern California, like I said before. And now I have to specify a couple of options for my recovery. So it would be the key pair I'm going to use for recovered Linux server. I'm going to select which kind of IP address or subnet is going to use, and obviously the security group, because if you're familiar with AWS, you know what I'm talking about. You always have to put some certain security group into the EC2 instance. Okay, and there was no cut, nothing. It just, within just one click, the recovery operation succeeded. And now I can go and switch to Northern California. Okay, I'm doing that. And I see that my instance is being recovered to Northern California. Okay. And yeah, I'm just preparing the connection to it. So once it's going to be recovered, I should be ready to connect to it. Okay. So it just, well, basically it takes like 20 seconds. Okay, it would be half a minute. Okay, there we go. It's running, and yeah, I should be able to access it now. There we go. So what happened is I made a backup of my physical Linux server. Then I recovered that my physical Linux server to the AWS cloud. Then I used my CPM, or Cloud Protection Manager, to protect it. And then I used my Cloud Protection Manager to recover that instance into the different region, different availability zone. And now this is the multi-cloud story. This is how our data flow is going. So it started from the data center, which is on-prem, but we ended up in the cloud, and now we're protecting it in the cloud. Okay, let's switch to the slides. Yeah, so this is the slide I've been already showing to you on the very beginning. This is how we perceive the multi-cloud industry and multi-cloud story these days. And what we have here is that it's all the time we think about those migration scenarios and data flow going in and out and to and from and within. And we've got some certain solutions under this Veeam availability platform that you should leverage, and they will help you to get your data protected and get your data managed. And it's all coming within the certain simple and very intuitive user interface. So it should be easy for you to deploy things and to perform those operations. And I believe this is it from me today. Yeah, and with that, I'm ready to hand it over to David.
Thank you very much, Andrew Zhelezko. Let's get in a couple of secret words here. Backup, B-A-C-K-U-P, that's backup, and protect, P-R-O-T-E-C-T, protect. Now let's go to slide 46, and we'll turn it over to Anil Karmel, CEO of C2 Labs.
Thank you very much, David, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. So let's start this conversation by talking about data. So we had a great introduction from Lynda talking about the value of information and how organizations are using that, and some incredible metrics around how they're thinking about protecting that information. Then we saw a great demonstration from Andrew around a valuable technology to secure that information. So let's talk about that security aspect and the threat landscape that surrounds the information today. So, you know, as we think about data today, data is our new oil, wherein the value of our information is incredibly important. And as a result, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be mining for it and finding ways to get access to it, much like the oil rush of yesteryear. So with that, if you go to the next slide, when you think about the history of cyber attacks, when you think about what was the first cyber attack, interestingly enough, we can count back to 1862, which is known as the Great Locomotive Chase, where during the Civil War, a group of Union soldiers took over a locomotive and in Chattanooga, Tennessee, headed that direction and decided along the way that they would destroy every train platform and wreak havoc. Now, what they did to be successful, and this is what makes it a cyber attack, is they cut the telegraph wires on their way. So the Confederacy couldn't send warnings ahead to alert the next train station that this train was coming. So this is our first evidence of a physical system attack that can be quantified as a cyber attack. If you go to the next slide, so this slide and the next two slides, this one and the following one, were borrowed with permission from my friend Bob Gorley, the former Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So he put together this great condensed history of the cyber threat model. So if you look at just a couple of these, I'll just point out a couple. One of them specifically is, when we look at the human element, WikiLeaks, right, where you've got a human element leaking information to different parties. This is protecting the human is incredibly critical. Then we're talking about protecting the data. If you look at 2012, Shamoon, Saudi Aramco was hacked by a rogue element taking out 30,000 desktop computers and basically halting the movement of oil around Saudi Arabia. They used their entire private fleet of airplanes to go fly around and purchase the world's supply of hard drives to replace 30,000 desktops within their organization and bring themselves back up and running, which caused a momentary increase in prices for hard drives around the world. So, this is an example of a disruption that completely took out a nation state's oil system. And that's not the only disruption. I mean, that's in 2012. We've got disruptions since there in governments and healthcare where ransomware attacks can take down entire hospitals, and now humans are in fact impacted, where the life of a person can be held hostage for Bitcoin. So there's a tremendous amount of attacks out there to that end. If you go to the next slide, when you think about that in the context of human history, you think about Hannibal, who his generals told him that as he was trying to cross the Alps, that it was completely impossible for him and his army to cross the Alps. Hannibal responded infamously that either I'll find a way or I'll make a way. The reality is attackers are going to find a way to get through your firewalls, through your layers of defense, to get access to the information that you have, because your data is the new oil. Now the question is, how do you employ the right protections around your business information? So if we go to the next slide, we should now frame this conversation around the context of cloud. So we've got a variety of different cloud deployment models, infrastructure as a service on the private cloud side, publicly software as a service, platform as a service, and of course infrastructure as a service. But as Lynda mentioned at the onset of this conversation, hybrid cloud is becoming the new de facto norm. This is where people are defaulting to in terms of deployment. So if hybrid cloud is our de facto norm, how do we employ the right security posture in that type of environment? Well, I'm going to speak to this conversation through the lens of standards. Standards and stories, because I think stories help frame standards. So next slide, we'll use standards, is NIST SP 500-292, which is the Cloud Computing Security Reference Architecture, which depicts 5 actors: the cloud consumer, who consumes information; the cloud auditor, which is that auditing capability for auditing information, and that's going to be important near the end of this conversation; the cloud provider, who is the provider of information to the consumer; the carrier, which is the carrier of information across all 5 of these elements; and then the cloud broker, which is an arbitrator or arbitrage across the provider, carrier, consumer, and auditor. So all 5 of these elements work together to provide a singular service to, or a multitude of services to constituents. With that said, at the very bottom, as you can see, there are cross-cutting concerns around security and privacy that we're going to discuss shortly. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that Lynda mentioned at the beginning of this conversation was around the cloud computing shared responsibility model. Now, this is documented in SP 500-292, which we just referenced, and it's known as the security conservation principle. And what this means is as you are moving up the stack, when you're going from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service to software as a service, what you own and manage goes down, meaning the elements that are owned by the consumer are less in a software as a service model than they are in an infrastructure as a service model. So understanding what elements that you own and manage is incredibly important, and knowing how to provide the right protections and controls around that information are incredibly important. Next slide. So when we think about that through the context of our organization that we serve, what are some of the challenges that we face? So today, organizations' budgets are not necessarily going up. They have to deliver more, but their budgets are going down in this new fiscally and resource-constrained environment in which we operate. Couple that with the fact from a flexibility standpoint that existing IT investments are kind of hard to reconfigure or scale to meet new application demands depending on how they've been architected. And then from a transparency point of view, it's typically quite difficult to quantify the cost of optimizing the infrastructure that you have to support your new application requirements. So you've got this trifecta of challenges around agility, flexibility, and transparency. From an organizational point of view, how does that marry to the aspects around this new hybrid cloud deployment model? So I'm going to give you one more story before we step into standards. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about how do you modernize IT through the lens of cloud, mobile, social, and big data. So let's as I previously mentioned, let's tell a story and let's talk about that. So when you wake up in the morning, what's typically the first thing that you pick up, right? Most people are going to reach for their glasses. Most people are going to fumble around for a light switch maybe. But typically, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go pick up your cell phone. And what are you going to do when you pick up your cell phone? What's the first app that you're going to open? Well, some people are going to open up their calendar. Some people are going to go check social media and see what social media updates are going to be out there, because the best social media updates come in between 12 p.m. and 6 a.m. And then, of course, you're going to go check your email because, again, the best emails come in between 12 p.m. and 6 a.m. And then when you open up your email, you're going to click on, you're going to see an email there that's going to show you a LinkedIn update because you want to be connected with folks. So you click on the LinkedIn update. Looks like someone that's important. They reached out to you. They wanted to connect. You click the button. You connected with them. You checked your calendar to figure out where it is that you needed to be. And you were all kinds of productive, and you were still in your bed. You hadn't even got out of bed yet. So you get up, you get ready, you start going to work, you stop by Starbucks, you pick up a latte, you take a picture, you post it on Instagram, and now you're documenting your trip to work, and you checked in where you were. You go to work. You sit down at your desk, you plug your phone in to your desktop, and you make sure that it's fully charged and it's rejuvenating itself because you were so productive this morning that, once you get to work, you want to make sure you have enough juice to make it through the day. 15 minutes later, you get a knock on the door, and it is your system administrator saying, "Sir, we have been had." Well, what do you mean we've been had? Sir, we've been had. Well, let's back up to 6:30 in the morning when you woke up, and at 6:45 you clicked that LinkedIn notice. Well, when you clicked that LinkedIn notice, it wasn't actually a link to LinkedIn. It was actually a link to a site that downloaded malware onto your phone. When you turned on the geolocation and turned on your geolocation feature, when you went ahead to Starbucks and you checked in on Instagram and knew where you were, and then when it got to your office and you connected to the corporate wireless network and you plugged into your phone and used your phone as a command and control vehicle to get into your network and access your internal network resources. So this is a very real world potential scenario that could potentially happen. So when we think about it through the lens of cloud, mobile, social, and big data, cloud has a very powerful ROI story, but there are real security challenges that we're going to talk about, and there are ways to solve these problems, right? So this isn't just all fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There are ways to solve these problems. We're going to talk about that, and you've heard some earlier today, and you're going to hear some more now through standards and methodologies. Mobile, you know, you've got this great BYOD policy with mobile application management to secure your devices, but there are still security and privacy concerns that need to be addressed. And again, there's ways to address that. With social, you know, you can have agency data that inadvertently ends up on public social networks via geotagging, because now if we know where you are, you know, we know where, you know, you as the human reside, and the human, you know, needs to be protected. And then from a big data perspective, you know, when we think about the mosaic effect is, you know, A plus B equals C, in that two unclassified pieces of information put together can yield a classified piece of information. So when you put these different elements together and you yield something that's actionable, right, how do you protect that information? So how do you find this balance between time to market, cost concerns, security, privacy, and risk in a move to this new cloud-connected enterprise in a hybrid environment where you're entrusted to manage and protect your business data? Next slide, please. So you need to redefine context. You need to understand who the user is, what data that user is trying to access, where's the user and where's the data, and how are they accessing that information? Something that you can think about as context-aware IT, where the level of assurance of the data defines the required level of trust. So what does that mean? You know, if you're accessing your bank regularly from wherever you happen to live, right, you're typically provided or prompted with a traditional access token. You may have two-factor turned on, right? But if you travel, let's say overseas, and you access your bank, depending on the sophistication of your bank, typically it asks you for another credential to validate that you are who you say you are, because the way you're accessing the information has changed, right? That last bullet of how are they accessing the information. They want to validate that you are indeed still the user, right? So ensuring that who the user is, right? Identity management is incredibly important. You know, laying these 4 questions out across the 5 roles that are documented in SB 500-292 will help you build a context-aware IT approach. Now, let's talk about that through the lens of data. So the next slide, let's talk about how you can apply that context around a data-centric approach, right? So the first step in doing that is to understand your data. You need to understand and identify the value of the information within your enterprise. You can't employ the same protections and controls around your information, around all of your information. Some data doesn't require the same level of protection as others. So understanding and identifying, this is the data that we have, here's what's sensitive, here's what's not, and then here's the protections and controls that we need to employ around the same is incredibly important. Then you need to decompose your data, where you break down these applications and this information into fundamental concrete building blocks in which you can now architect security controls around, especially through the lens of hybrid cloud. And then you need to monitor that information, where you understand the risk to that data using the risk management framework. So there's the RMF 837 Rev 2 from a NIST perspective. There's the cybersecurity framework that is also available. And there's a couple others that we're going to talk about shortly from a standards and frameworks point of view that you can use to, again, understand and monitor your risk. And then employ continuous monitoring of your systems to identify and limit the damage an adversary has to your information. So understand your data, decompose your data, and monitor your data. Now let's talk about a couple standards and frameworks that you can use to do just that. So next slide, please. So there is a framework known as the Cloud Controls Matrix available on the Cloud Security Alliance, so cloudsecurityalliance.org. Take a look at this. So what this does is it takes a lot of the industry standards that we have to comply with today, things like ISO 27001 and 27002, ISACA, COBIT, PCI, NIST 853, and normalizes those standards across capabilities and control domains, so you can understand if this is the control domain that applies to my information system, here are the standards and controls within said standards that apply to those control domains, and then how you can tailor those controls to meet your organization's requirements. So it does a really good job of taking these individual catalogs and controls and abstracting them into control domains or capabilities. So something definitely to look at from a framework point of view to help you understand how to secure your information. Now the second piece of that, next slide, is a new standard that's just being developed right now, and we're helping with that. It's called the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, otherwise known as OSCAL. This standard is known as a standard of standards, which normalizes how system security controls and corresponding assessment information is represented in both a machine-readable and human-readable format. So what does that mean? So if we go to the next slide, what it does is we just talked about all these different standards that organizations have to comply with: NIST 853, PCI, HIPAA, cybersecurity framework. There's a myriad of different standards and frameworks that people have to adhere to. This provides a standardized way of normalizing that information across all these disciplines and domains, just like CSF does, or the CSA Cloud Controls Matrix does, but does so in a standard XML schema that can be used by both humans and machines. So the design goals are that it's standardized, that it's interoperable, so that tools using this information can use it consistently, and that it's easy to use, so that you can use this information, again, to secure your information. So the whole goal of this is to improve the efficiency, accuracy, and consistency of system security assessment. So next slide, please. So, you know, by using this type of standard of standards, you typically, to generate all these documents, you have to employ a litany of individuals to create Word documents and Excel spreadsheets that are arduous to maintain. So this is designed to allow you to assess your system security state, ideally continuously, against several sets of requirements simultaneously, and doing so consistently, right? So next slide will give you kind of a high-level overview of how that works, right? So you take the catalog layer, which is, again, NIST 853, starting from left to right, COBIT 5, ISO IC 27001, which generates your security control documentation. You then go to the profile layer and you select what controls apply to your information system, or you tailor or implement those controls for your information system, or you create a custom baseline. And that gets you your security control baseline documentation, which is human-oriented. Then when you get to the implementation layer, you can now document the security control implementations for your system security plan, which is used in heavily regulated organizations. And you can also perform gap analyses and update those SSPs to ensure your controls are addressed, which generates your SSP, your system security plan, from a human-oriented point of view. Right, and then in the assessment layer, you can establish these assessment and audit plans to ensure, you know, based on what your requirements are, and then see if your systems are still set to those parameters, right? So this generates your control assessment and audit plans, right? And then through automation, you can produce assessments and audit results based on the state of that implementation, which is your assessment results layer, which is the security control assessment and audit results. So the standard is still being developed, so we're still working on the standard. So this is a new emerging standard that's being built, so it's not fully complete yet, but this gives you at least a sense of where NIST is headed in terms of a standard of standards to help normalize the representation of security controls across standards to drive continuous assurance. So next slide. And I believe that's it. So I will hand the mic back over to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Anil Karmel. We have time for only a couple of questions. So, quickly, Andrew, people who might be interested in Veeam, how do they find you?
Well, it's really easy. Just you go to the internet and you just type in the veeam.com, and then we've got the solutions page. So if you just hover over the solutions that we've got, and there is a particular chapter, it's all about the cloud solutions and our multi-cloud story. So it's really easy. And then we guide you through the things that we have there. So really easy. And then I believe that you guys distributed the email address of mine. So anyone, it should be really easy for you to contact me personally.
All right,
Don't hesitate. Yeah, thank you.
Lynda Stadtmueller, data protection. I always thought it was the cloud provider who was supposed to maintain the security. Not so, huh?
Well, it depends. Your cloud provider is going to certainly be responsible for physical security, and they're going to be able to do some things to protect to keep your application running. But no, it's not the responsibility. Legally, in most cases, the responsibility for whether it's a data breach or data loss falls with the business. The business is primarily considered the data owner. And truth be told, you probably don't want a cloud infrastructure as a service provider mucking around in your data. So it's a shared responsibility, and both parties have to do their part to get it right. You know what, I'm going to kick this over to Anil. You mentioned some interesting things about the cloud stack, infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what is the responsibility of the business versus the cloud service provider.
Absolutely, yeah. So, if you look at it through the lens of NIST SP 500-292, where it talks about the 5 roles, the cloud consumer, which is in essence the consumer, there are inherent set of security controls that the consumer is responsible for maintaining. So if you think about it through for example, an infrastructure as a service provider, right? So let's say you're leveraging Amazon Web Services, right? They're providing you a server, whether it be a Linux server or Windows server, right? You are responsible for the security of that server. If it's a Linux server, you're responsible for patching that server, maintaining that server, hardening it, defining the access control as to who can access it, who can SSH into that box, so on and so forth, right? If you're in a software as a service provider as a consumer, you do not have that responsibility to maintain or manage that underlying Linux server that's providing that service. That's the responsibility of the cloud provider, which is the other role in SP 500-292. So, as you move up the stack, as we talked about the security conservation principle, what you own and manage goes down. So if you're at the bottom of the stack from an infrastructure as a service, to use that proverb, bottom, meaning, you own more of it, there are more things that you're going to be responsible as a cloud consumer to own and manage. As you move up the stack to software as a service or platform as a service, really, right, there's a lot less for you to own and manage. So, you need to quantify what that is, and each deployment model is going to be different. So understanding the security controls that apply to you and then the ownership and governance around that is going to be inherently critical to secure your information.
Let's get our final secret word in. That word is technologies, T-E-C-H-N-O-L-O-G-I-E-S. Lynda, another question for you, and that is there any substantial problem with IT professionals who decide that it's a good idea to run non-approved SaaS applications in their cloud?
Whoa, now we're getting into a whole nother kettle of fish. What you're talking about sometimes is called going rogue, or it's called shadow IT sometimes. And is it a problem? Well, that depends on the security profile of the applications themselves. It depends on the need for security, what's in the application, what it's running. And, frankly, I'm going to put that down to your company's governance policies, whether or not you are actually putting corporate data and the corporate network at risk, frankly, should be less of a decision factor than what your corporation has determined is appropriate. You know, one of the stories that Anil told, you know, it kind of addressed this in a different way when he talked about the user who inadvertently introduced some sort of a virus or malware into the corporate network. There's that risk, but I've seen a number of businesses. In fact, I did a survey some years ago that indicated that upwards of 83% of business users have deployed some sort of non-approved SaaS, software as a service, via the corporate network. Is it always a problem in terms of introducing malware? I'm sure not. Is there always a risk? Absolutely. So governance is an issue here that businesses, that IT organizations, and maybe the Chief Information Security Officer need to get their arms around, understand what's possible, what's best for the business, and make sure customers are buying into that.
Anil, this one is for you, and it'll be the last question we've got time for. Have you found in your travels that IT people, the Chief Information Officer or the Chief Information Security Officer, do they know enough about cloud controls, the cloud control matrix, or NIST OSCAL? And is this something that, if you're running a company, you should be looking at your Chief Information Officer and going, you know, look around and see if there are any continuing education classes out there to update your skills, because I don't want to get caught shorthanded.
Excellent point. You know, so CISOs and CIOs absolutely do need to keep abreast of these new technologies and standards. You know, and they do go to a lot of events. I know, you know, when I was a Fed, I went to a lot of events. I continue to do so to try and, you know, keep up my education on what's the latest and greatest out there and what are our peers using. You know, so you know, there's a lot of peer-to-peer networking at that level. Having served at that level myself, you know, it's something that you know, you learn from your peers, but you also learn from you know, from the boots on the ground, the folks that are doing the real work. So, you know, it takes a village to secure information, and you need that information brought to the right people to make the right decisions, right? Sometimes those decisions are made by the IT professionals on the ground that say, you know what, this is a new standard, this is a new technology, this is an issue, and I'm going to solve this problem within my sphere of influence, and then take that upwards to my CIO or CISO. There's a lot of value in that, and I've personally served in that. You know, we help organizations at every layer of IT, and then there's value also from the CIO or CISO point of view, wherein there's like, you know, there's this new capability, new technology. You know, let's take a look at that and see how that fits into our ecosystem to better protect our information. At the end of the day, it's going to take a village, because no one person is going to be able to solve all these problems. So by solving all these problems through the different lenses in which we operate, we can better protect our information if we understand the value of it first.
Last but far from least, key takeaways. Starting with you, Andrew Zhelezko. What's the thing you'd like attendees?
Well, if you ask me, it would be, so it's really important to understand the development and the growth of technologies, and it's really important to question yourself and your company all the time. Are we doing everything right? And so, like 1 year later, are we still doing everything right? What could be the new technology that would allow us to do much more? And with that, it's always a good, well, I guess it's always a great experience, a great exercise to just step out and try to re-evaluate situation and try to do much more than you used to do. And with all those solutions out there, it should be easy as never.
Lynda Stadtmueller.
Yeah, I think that my one word of advice fits in both with that last question as well as with what Andrew just said, which is that cloud is complex. Running an IT environment is complex and getting increasingly so on a daily basis. In order to ensure your business not only is running optimally, but is secure, you're securing your applications and data, look to a partner. Go to an expert. You don't need to develop it all on staff. You need the right technology partner, and in many cases, it might make sense to go with a managed services partner who can help you get your arms around your whole security profile.
Anil Karmel.
Yep, and I would concur with both Andrew and Lynda, and just to add to that, you certainly want to have the right partner. And you want to have the right technologies. So to do so, I'm going to give you three things to think about. A, understand the value of your data, right? Because if you don't understand the value, it's very difficult to provide the right protections and controls around that information. Secondly, quantify the risks to that information, right? Now that you know how valuable your information is, what are the risks to that? And then third, last but not least, employ the right technologies to secure that information. Right, if you understand the value, you can quantify the risk, you can employ the right technologies, and now you have the means to secure your mission-critical business data across cloud environments.
Our thanks to Andrew Zhelezko, Technical Product Analyst, Software, Lynda Stadtmueller, Vice Computing Services, Frost Sullivan, and Anil Karmel, CEO of C2 Labs. If you are applying for continuing education credits, filling out that survey is mandatory per your state boards and bars. We're also required to keep a completed copy of that survey from you. If you would like some free CE credits, share your insights with us. We're doing a continuing education success survey to improve the knowledge group and better serve you. Give us 10 minutes on the phone. We'll give you 3 months of free CE webcasts. You'll find a link in the chat window on the upper right-hand side of the main presentation screen that you can sign up and be part of. If you requested a recording of today's event or a certificate of attendance, you'll get the relevant information by email in the next 24 to 48 hours. This concludes the event Cloud-to-Cloud Data Protection, Managing and Protecting Your Business Data, the live webcast. If you've got a question for any of the members of our panel, Andrew Zhelezko, Lynda Stadtmueller, or Anil Karmel, their contact information is included in your events materials. If you have a problem locating it, that's really not a problem. Just send a request for their contact information to us, info@theknowledgegroup.org.